Welcome to the Expona Audio Insider Podcast. My name is Lenny Florentine. I'm here with Nick Brown from SVS, one of the biggest subwoofer and speaker and cable manufacturers in the country. What is up, man? How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, Lenny. It is a pleasure to be here on the AXPONA podcast. This has been on my audio bucket list here for a while.
And you guys do Expona every year. Every year that I've ever been, you guys have been there, and you always have, a room or two set up with all of your speakers and subwoofers, and I've seen you at some other shows as well.
Well, we firmly believe, audio is one of those things that you have to experience live, and, we love going to the shows. We have a very passionate community. We get to see people come out with their Sound Revolution t-shirts, and, it's just a great opportunity to be in front, do some great social media content, but also unleash some demos, both in the home theater and the two-channel room, and just have some fun mixing it up with the attendees.
So if someone, for whatever reason, is watching this and doesn't know SVS, what is SVS all about?
So SVS, a little brief history lesson. We started basically in a Youngstown garage, and really the formidable moment for us was to create subwoofers and ship them direct to consumer, because at the time when we started about 23 years ago, there weren't a lot of subwoofers available for the home market, and the ones that were out there were just ridiculously expensive or massively oversized. So we wanted to bring a level of value that didn't exist, but also with some consumer policies and a direct to consumer distribution approach that really brought subwoofers to more people and sort of redefined what was possible, since I think at the time subwoofers are sort of known as those boomy things that cars would sort of extract as they were driving by. Since then, we've tried to bring that same mentality to speakers and cables and some of our other product lines as well. And we really treasure our customer service and our approach to taking care of people in our community as well. And that's kind of what has built SVS, and now we're available in retail and over 100 countries around the world. And it's really been a fun ride as far as growing the brand for SVS.
So you mentioned you have a community, right? They go to these shows and they're wearing their SVS t-shirts and they're getting to enjoy, the new products and whatever you put out there. So tell me about the community, because that's something different that not a lot of people mention or have. So what is that? What is the community you guys have?
It was built in a lot of different ways. One, I think we don't take ourselves too seriously. For a lot of these live events, we were sort of known as the guilty pleasure. There'd be all these really sort of high-end two-channel systems, and then we'd be in there playing Godzilla versus Kong on a multi-channel home theater and really sort of showcasing a different side of audio. And we've matured. Now we have both the two-channel room, so we'll take care of those hi-fi enthusiasts and play the music and give you your Hotel California if that's what you really want. But we take requests, and so that's a big part of letting our community sort of dictate the kind of stuff they want to hear. But then it's also cultivated through social media and a lot of the content we create and just how we take care of our customers. It's really important for us, being founded as an e-commerce company, to sort of demystify audio for people who are just getting into it, take away some of that fear of getting into it, whether that's from am I going to set it up correctly? Am I going to choose the right products? So we really try to walk people through that process. And I think, one of the best ways that I can sort of encapsulate it is we get these comments and reviews on our site where it's basically like, when I talk to SVS customer support, it's like dealing with a friend who's in the industry who really just wants me to have the best experience possible. And I think that's sort of what's helped us cultivate, what I would consider a community.
It's an amazing, so at these shows, I listen to stuff that nobody else listens to at these shows. That's probably why I always try to hit the SVS room, is because they do take requests. I can listen to stuff that I enjoy listening to, which will clear a room. Typically not your room, but it'll clear any other room because nobody wants to listen to it or watch movies. I remember, you have the home theater set up, and I've seen you playing movies in these. I even seen you at some other shows where it's in expo halls and you have like a room built. It's just amazing stuff. I've seen like a display of your 16-inch subwoofer where it's like cut in half and you can kind of like see on the inside. I thought that was just an amazing display piece. And I have a story about that subwoofer. So this weekend I was doing a system setup for somebody out in Indianapolis. We drove out there and we're doing a system setup. And the speakers that this guy had on his front two channels. So he had, a bunch of very powerful amps very minimalistic setup. He had a clipped Cornwall sitting on top the SVS 16 sub, the PB, the one with the 3 bass ports. Like, just so that was the bass driver. And then he had the mid and the high from a Cornwall. And he had this on both sides. And it just goes to show, like, when you said, like, subwoofers are always thought of like this boomy, bass thing. It can operate, like, seeing it operate in that fashion for the first time was so interesting because you could feel it. Like, you could feel almost like the air moving across the room, but it was still tight and, like, articulate and didn't sound like a boomy bass subwoofer that most people would think of. It was an incredible experience, but that was the main 2 speakers. The bass driver was the SVS PBC, which was crazy.
First time I've heard of that kind of DIY setup before, but I can honestly tell you the creativity that we see with some of our customers, it's wild. We've seen people stack 3 of those sealed version of that SB16s on each side of their Magna Planar speakers. We've seen people do 8 just in every wall, in every corner in the rooms. I think that's a big part of where we've sort of set ourselves apart is by creating low frequencies that aren't just that big, loud, sort of one-note boomy bass. It's articulate, like you said. It's accurate in frequency response. It has texture. It has nuance. Even at low listening levels, you're still getting impact and you're still feeling sort of that visceral rumble. And I think, the hi-fi community has started to appreciate that, because I do think there was a stereotype for a long time where it's like, 2-channel subwoofers aren't for you. And I think that's really sort of become an obsolete way of thinking.
On that note of, like, building, like, crazy systems and the community building all this stuff, you guys yourself have, in the past year-ish, your new line of speakers, the Ultra Evolution series. These are some wild-looking speakers as well, just in general, but these are also your most award-winning speakers of all time, like, at least within a year span. You guys have put out these Ultra Evolutions, and they just, like, people have been just blown away by how they sound. And, like, the looks alone, I remember when these were announced and seeing how you guys did the arch in the front or whatever it is. It's just very unique and something that, like, someone would put in their house, like, and people would come over and the person coming over their house would be like, whoa, what is that? Like, it's kind of jaw-dropping. So tell me about this series of speakers.
Yeah, absolutely. And you will be able to experience them both in 2-channel and a home theater setup at AXPONA. And what we really tried to do is integrate some technology and some things that, it had been 12 years since we had redone our flagship series. So we knew we couldn't do like a, ultra pro version. It had to be a complete, here's the word, Lenny, evolution. And so, from everything from the cabinet, and what you were talking about is that acoustically centered time alignment, that sort of arched front of the baffle. That's something that we didn't invent, but it's something that we brought to a more attainable price point. And that's about, just ensuring the sound reaches your ear at the exact same instant from all of those drivers. The sonic emanation point of the woofers, the mid-range, and the tweeter are all aligned on a vertical plane. And, a lot of times you'll add micro delays through crossover, but by physically aligning them, you just get that much better rock solid imaging. You get just much more accurate sound stage. And so, that was a big thing we wanted to do. And it looks kind of cool too. I'm not gonna lie. And then from like a material standpoint, with the tweeters, we did an all new diamond coated aluminum dome tweeter. And, we had always used aluminum dome tweeters, but by adding this basically diamond vapor dust, or this diamond dust via a process called vapor deposition, it really makes the aluminum much more rigid without adding that much more mass. So essentially you can bring that breakup point to close to 40,000 hertz, which is beyond the threshold of human hearing, and you don't get any of that shrillness or any of the sibilance that I think sometimes people perceive with the metal dome tweeter. It just sort of softens that up a bit. And then, SVS, we are fond of our low frequencies. So, with the bass drivers, we took a little hint from our 3000 micro subwoofer and did a dual opposing woofer array on all 3 of the Ultra Evolution towers. And so essentially, within the cabinet, they're moving in, they're moving out together. And we call that our force balance array, and eliminates any kind of resonance, any kind of vibration within the cabinet. But then if you have a pair of these towers towed in your system, you essentially have 8 woofers all firing in different directions throughout the room. Gives you really nice authoritative bass, but it's clean, it's tight, it's musical, and also helps you have a more even distribution of the low frequency response throughout the listening area, because again, you have 8 woofers firing in different directions. So, from the materials, from how we designed the drivers to the actual cabinet shape, everything was a complete reimagination of what we wanted to do in a flagship speaker.
And when you do this, you have so not a lot of companies in, with a higher end product, right? A flagship product, do something that works so well between home theater and 2-channel listening. So a lot of companies are either, they're home theater and that's kind of what they work good for, or they're 2-channel and that's what they kind of advise you to use them for. But yours have this really good mix. And, the way you guys have done your branding and your product assortment, it just can reach everybody and almost gets higher end hi-fi into the hands of someone who is just going to set up a home theater. Maybe they don't know hi-fi, but it kind of mixes to both people, which is really interesting that you guys have gone at it from that standpoint.
You're so right with that, Lenny, and I think there is this sort of mentality where especially with the super high-end speakers, maybe they don't have the big exciting dynamics or the low frequency extension to really stand out in a home theater setting. And then, vice versa, a home theater speaker, maybe it's not articulate enough, it doesn't present that rock solid image, it's not doing the things that you want to hear with critical 2-channel music listening. And we really want to sort of bridge that gap and provide, a speaker that's great in any scenario, whatever kind of music you're listening to, action movies or classical music. Have it be truthful to what the artist or director really wanted you to hear, but also not sacrifice anything when it comes to, like I said, the big bold dynamics and the deep bass extension, or sort of the clarity and some of those more audiophile characteristics that I think people listen to for critical music.
Talking about big, bold dynamics and bass extension, you guys have a new subwoofer, am I right?
A new series, yep, ported in a sealed model.
And this is your biggest of all time?
These are our new flagship 17 Ultra Revolution models. They are the biggest and most powerful that we've ever launched. So this was a really big deal for us. I think we first showed them at CEDIA last year, sort of as a teaser, and then they started shipping later in October, early November.
So tell me about these, because this one I'm not familiar with. I'm familiar with the 16. Tell me a little bit about this line of subwoofers, maybe the DSPs, or what kind of performance enhancements that you guys put into this, because that is a large, I've seen the 16 and that thing, I listened to it at CEDIA a year or two ago and it was wild. But what can you expect if you have a 16? Go a little more.
Yeah, the 16s are no slouches, so I certainly will not say anything to denigrate them, but, the challenge for us was how do we improve upon those from a performance standpoint, but also a control standpoint, and, it's not just about the tractor pull. It's not, can we make it louder and can we make it play lower? Certainly those are two of the most important, if not the most important factors for most subwoofer enthusiasts, but also you want to have that level of accuracy and control and transient response, so they're keeping up with the source content or whatever speakers you have. So we did that in a couple of different ways, and it does warrant mentioning that they are almost exactly the same size as the 16 Ultra, even as the driver got an inch bigger, and that's essentially because we got rid of the front panel display that was on the 16 Ultras. And the reason we did that is because our subwoofer app has been so successful that we really didn't see the need to have a front panel display anymore. When we launched the 16 Ultras, those were the first models with the app. And so, we were like, well, we better give them an alternative method of control on the front panel as well as on the rear panel. But that really sort of became moot once the app really took off. But from an internal design standpoint, yes, it's a 1-inch larger driver. There's a bigger motor attached to that driver. But the real magic, I guess you could say, as far as the driver goes, is the dual 8-inch voice coils. And this just allows us to really have precise, exacting control of that driver. You know, when you get to drivers of these size, they can be prone to flexing or bowing, and that can cause distortion and sound that's not truthful. So by having the dual voice coil design, we're essentially able to have double the amount of electronic current in there controlling the driver itself, and then feeding those dual voice coils is a dual monoblock amplifier. It's rated at 2,800 watts, and it's essentially 4 amplifiers bridged into 2 that are then fed into that dual voice coil. And again, it allows it to run really, really efficiently, because the other thing you're up against with a subwoofer of this size and this power is what is a typical home AC circuit capable of. And we didn't want people to have to go out and put a dedicated 20 amp circuit or anything like that. It'll work off a standard 15 amp circuit because the amplifier itself has enough power on reserve at all times to really hit those peak dynamic moments, action music, explosions, EDM bass drops, whatever it is that you want to listen to. It's not going to cut out at that moment where you need it the most. And so that was another challenge that we looked to overcome, was making sure that it had enough power on demand to really step up to that, and also a built-in line conditioner to make sure it's clean flowing current that isn't susceptible to distortion and other things that could affect performance.
The dual coil and the dual mono amps and the in-box power line conditioner, is that something, was any of that in the 16?
No, none of that. We did have an 8-inch voice coil in the original, but it wasn't a dual 8-inch voice coil. And then the amplifier was Class D. It was rated at, I believe, 1,500 watts. This one's rated at 2,800 watts RMS. And so there was, a significant amount of power delivery enhancements that we made. And then the last piece, as far as control goes, we did add 3 additional parametric EQs to the subwoofer app. And then within the next few months, we're also going to have auto EQ room correction with our own external mic that will really be able to help you get your subwoofer dialed in terms of in-room response and making sure it's blended as seamlessly as possible.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the app. So you guys have your own app that is for all the subwoofers, correct?
Correct. All of our current models. Yep.
And what is unique about this app? Because I've heard really good things about this app.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a really easy, sophisticated way to control the subwoofer. I mean, everything from, volume control to blending it with your speakers, and people who have, done subwoofer tuning before. I mean, it can be pretty painstaking to have to go behind the sub, turn a knob, go back to the main listening position, not quite there, back and forth, back and forth. So it just provides that level of convenience. But also we have custom presets. So if you want to have a nighttime mode where maybe it's dialed down a little bit, or a music mode where maybe the settings are adjusted to help it blend and play a little bit more musically, all of that is an option. And then even with the ported subwoofers, we have like a port tuning mode where you can run it all sealed, where all the ports are sealed, so you can essentially get a little bit quicker transient response, more musicality, or you can have one port open to get deeper low frequency extension with sacrificing a little bit of output. So it just allows a lot more customization, but also ease of tuning the sub and getting it blended into your system, which again, I think for people who are real hobbyists, they love that level of granular control and the ability to get it completely dialed into their own specifications and their own listening preferences.
And so preferences, you have subwoofers that come both with the port and unported. So some people may look at them and kind of be confused, right? Like, which one do I get? What is going to do what better? So why would someone in either scenario choose ported or unported?
Sure. I mean, a ported subwoofer first it's physically larger than a sealed subwoofer. It's going to produce greater output, deeper low frequency extension with the same size driver and the same power amplifier, just because of the size of the cabinet volume. So, typically we would recommend that for people who really like to crank it, or if they have really large spaces, a ported subwoofer will help energize that type of space with a little bit more ease. Whereas a sealed cabinet subwoofer tends to be quicker, a little bit more, speedy in the transient, so it can start and more importantly stop on a dime with a little bit more effectiveness. And so people who are really into certain kinds of music will find the sealed subwoofer much more effective at keeping up, especially with, electrostats, magnet planar, super quick speakers will benefit from being paired with a sealed cabinet subwoofer. And then we sell about 2 to 1 more sealed cabinet subwoofers, just because they don't do anything bad. They do everything really, really well, but they're more compact. They're a little bit less expensive. And so they pass the acceptance factor with a little bit more ease than the big behemoth ported. But certainly there is a crowd for the ported models as well. And like I was saying, the benefit of being able to plug the ports and essentially run it in a sealed configuration gives you a little bit more flexibility as well.
So then you have the subwoofers, like you were saying, that were in the Evolution towers, where they're rear facing. Is that the right terminology? I might be wrong there, but where both drivers are against each other.
Yeah,
what's the terminology?
Dual opposing.
But so you have those in the Evolution tower, and then the Micro 3000. Is that the correct? Am I
Correct.
right there?
3000 micro. Yep.
So explain that terminology, because what's interesting, the system, the guy that had the two 16s for his front bass drivers, also in another room had one of the micros like under his desk in like a little cabinet. And I think it does so much in such a little footprint that it could be like the answer to bass and subwoofers for a lot of people who are worried or fear for that like large, like what we just talked about, the acceptance factor, that large build. I think the micro really takes care of that, right?
It really does. Micro subwoofers for a while had a bit of an issue for brands using a passive radiator, which is essentially a non-powered woofer. It sort of moves air, but it doesn't actually have power flowing to it. So it can give you more output, but it tends to sound a little sloppier. It's not as clean and articulate. And the other problem was micro subwoofers with passive radiators would sometimes dance across the floor. You'd put it up there, you'd start cranking your music, and then all of a sudden it's like 3 feet away, and you're like, wait, what happened? So the dual opposing array, essentially it cancels out any of that sort of energy that could either make the subwoofer move or cause vibrations within the cabinet, but it also gives you more output. Obviously having two drivers, in this case 8-inch drivers in the micro, moving air is going to get you greater dynamic output and allow you to fill a larger space while benefiting from a smaller amount of cabinet volume. And so, to your point, it's a great solution because it doesn't rattle. I've literally had it at peak, volume and balanced a nickel on it because it's so inert in terms of any kind of vibrations or any kind of energy that's coming into the cabinet. But like you said, it allows us to have the magic of a really, really small subwoofer that sounds way, way bigger, and then also the ability to conceal it in furniture, behind a couch, wherever it is that you want to put it out of sight.
So how does that kind of driver, the dual opposing drivers, work as far as like standing waves in a room if you're trying to configure a room? So like if I had a optimal, this is not usually how it actually ends up because of the acceptance factor, just size of the room, but like optimally, I've been, told that, 4 subwoofers in a room is like up here, like this is like everything's going to be perfect. And then there's options with 2 subwoofers. Does having the opposing drivers help in that aspect of the room control with having maybe less subwoofers? Does it affect that at all? And if it does or doesn't, tell me a little bit about the reason for having multiple subwoofers.
Sure. I mean, I can tell you from anecdotal experience, the 3000 micro, if you compare it to our SB1000 Pro, which is our least expensive subwoofer and our next smallest, I actually think the micro does a better job of smoothing out some of those peaks and nulls that you were talking about, just because of the bass waves have greater saturation within the room because of the dual drivers. So while it won't completely eliminate them, like having dual or more subwoofers, it actually does help smooth out the bass response on some level within the room by having the dual driver array. I mean, the real benefit of having dual subwoofers, and we're huge proponents of that, not just because we want to sell more. We tell people if you have a single budget, cut it in half and get 2 subwoofers, you'll be much happier. But especially with larger seating area, it's the same principle. It's just having better low frequency sound wave density within the room. So you don't have this sort of peak up here where it's really boomy, and then you walk a few steps and then all of a sudden it drops off. And when you have a single subwoofer, not in every room, but in some rooms, especially ones with large seating areas, they tend to be more susceptible just because of how long the bass waves are, unlike high frequencies, which are much shorter, and they don't have that same susceptibility. The more subwoofers you add, the more even the bass response is going to be in the room, whether that's 2, 4, 8. You could just keep going and going and going. But there's real science to back up why 2 is better than 1, et cetera, et cetera.
And how does so that's interesting because I've done that where I've walked around the room to see where it kind of drops out. It's very interesting if you've never done that before. Somebody's watching, if you have a subwoofer and you just kind of walk around the room, you can see where those low points are, especially if you have multiples. Like it kind of, one may kind of fade out a little bit, but if you have multiples, you can really feel it where those low points are, and then you can counteract them and configure the room that way. But you talked earlier about like people that were stacking these. What is the benefits of stacking? Have you ever messed around with stacking subwoofers?
I mean, I've never had to in my house, nor do I have that much of a, I'm not a masochist for low frequencies like some people are. I mean, I think from a, smoothing out peaks and nulls, it doesn't have as much of an impact as just giving you sheer output that, you really, really want to be able to crank it. But again, the more subwoofers you add, and if you have them dialed in, you can play with the parametric EQs within the app. You can adjust their performance to, suit the room, and then you can get into, the Dirac and all of these other softwares, which really allow you to get down to the molecular level. So, if you're willing to go that far into it, then certainly you can achieve near perfect results. But I've never had the experience of stacking multiple 4,000s or 5,000 subwoofers in my own listening space, so I can't speak to it from a personal experience.
Yeah, I've always been curious about that. I've never really tried stacking the subwoofers, so I figured I don't. It's very very niche.
Yeah. I mean,
So
corner loading and stacking is definitely one of those things where, some people just swear by it, especially with sealed cabinet subs. You get the benefit of room gain as well, which don't ask me to explain that. There's science behind it. I know there is, Lenny, but, sealed subwoofers can essentially get a few extra dB of output and, hertz of low frequency extension just by pushing them up into a corner. So, stacking them in a corner even enhances it further, although you got to be careful because it can get a little boomy if you don't do it correctly.
And the Evolution towers, they have those in the bass drivers. Is that controlled the same way as a sub, or is it just like, is it separately done just in the speaker, or is it like considered a sub at the bottom of the speaker, kind of like powered speakers used to be? Like, how does that work, or is it just the drivers?
Yeah, so they are active, so neither one of them are passive, so they're just taking whatever power you're feeding it from an amp or an AV receiver, and so it's not something that you can like physically adjust through like an app, like how much output they're getting. It's all done through the way we design the crossover, but they don't suffer from the issues that passive radiators would have, which is, again, being a little bit slower and creating sort of that off-center balance of output within the cabinet. We worked really hard to make sure that it would, taking lessons from our 3000 micro, it would only enhance the low frequencies without adding anything and muddying up in a way that would be detrimental.
So for Expona coming up, people may want to come out and listen to the SVS systems. Like, what should we expect? Anything new to see that, we can talk about? Or what are people going to look forward to when they come to your room?
So we are gonna have some new subwoofer models. I can't say exactly what they're gonna be. They won't be new flagships because we just launched those, and we're not that crazy to come out with new ones. But if you followed SVS in the past, you kind of know how we roll with our trickle-down technology. So we will have some new fun stuff to show. We'll have a multi-channel room, which will probably be a 5.2.2. We'll be running that off of Marantz receiver with our ultra elevation speakers, bringing in some Dolby Atmos height effects, more than likely dual SB17s, ultra revolutions in that room. No, you know what? The new subs will be in that room. And then we'll have, the Ultra Evolution series, probably our Titan models, which is the second biggest tower, the center, and then bookshelves in the rear. And then in a 2-channel room, we're going to be running our flagship Ultra Evolution Pinnacles with the new Hagel integrated amp, which sounds absolutely phenomenal. It's a great pairing with those speakers. And then we'll also have a 2-channel system with the Ultra Evolution bookshelf speakers with our Prime Wireless Pro Soundbase streaming integrated amplifier. And we'll have the ability to work in a SB17 Ultra Revolution subwoofer into that bookshelf system as well. So you can kind of hear the flagship towers with a nice high-end integrated, and then the bookshelves with our streaming unit and a subwoofer, and kind of get a different flavor of each.
That sounds amazing. It's going to be a great time. I hope, I know I'll see you out there. We'll have some fun. I can't wait to check out, the new subs and the speakers and everything. It's going to be great. I appreciate you joining us on the show today. It was good catching up and hearing about, SVS and all the new products and kind of where they are in the landscape of things. I think it's such a good company. If you guys haven't experienced SVS, you have to go check them out, see the room. It's a must.
Well, I appreciate that, Lenny, and we are so stoked to go out to AXPONA this year. I hear they're going to have some new things, some new experiences, maybe some gaming experiences and some other things. So, SVS has always been about not just, the music and home theater, but expanding the sense of audiophile culture to any genre of sound. And I think, getting into the gaming space and having people see what's possible is going to be amazing. They got a great concert, I've heard, as well. I can't wait to go to Kuma Corner, the burger place. If you haven't been there, it's the heavy metal burger place.
You won't hear a thing when you're there. You're just going to...
That's right. They play old heavy metal videos, and you get to eat a burger and have an old fashioned, which is a great experience. So I always love going to AXPONA, and we'll be taking requests. Larry, our national training manager, will have his book of Blu-rays, and we got some fresh new content to put in the home theater system. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to be making some noise.
It's going to be amazing. I can't wait. Thanks for joining me today, Nick. It was a pleasure as always.
My pleasure, Lenny. Thanks for having me.
All right, and for the Expona Audio Insider podcast, that is all I have. We will see you next time.